Hi, and welcome to this special edition of Historically Speaking. With me today, I'm very honored to have with us Tom Taylor and Andy Spisak, who from a historical perspective bring a lot of knowledge and very interesting stories and anecdotes about Westland and its foundation and how it was founded. So first, Tom, why don't you just give us a little bit about your background?
All right, I was born in 1936 in Detroit, southwest Detroit, and my family gradually moved west, first to Garden City, and we were in Garden City during the Second World War. At the end of the war, we moved to Nankin Township. I was, I think, 11 years old when we moved onto Barton Street. Barton's a block north of Wayne Road, a block north of Marquette, and runs off of Wayne Road. It's only 2 streets long. It was a great place to grow up because there was a big county ditch that we could hunt pollywogs in the summer and ice skate on in the wintertime. The first school I went to was Katie School at Cherry Hill and Wayne Road, and then after that I went to St. Mary's in Wayne, and from there eventually I joined the Marine Corps, then came back after 3 years in the Marine Corps and got married.
Andy?
Well, I'm a Garden City boy, but I was born on Pardo Street, about 4 blocks out of Nankin Township, and 1 block north was Nankin Township. And I went to school in Garden City, but Nankin Township, I was born the year after Garden City left Nankin Township and became a city. So Garden City is part of the original 36 square of Nankin Township. And I went to school there, got married, lived in Nankin Township at Cherry Hill and the railroad track, 1956. Got drafted in the Army when I was 23 years old, and went to way after Taylor got out. He got out about the time I went in. And I became a Wayne police officer and was over there for 6 years in the city of Wayne. And then in 1966, I was fortunate enough to become a Westland police officer, one of the original 33. There were 33 of us hired in 1966, about 6 months after it became a city. I think October the 15th of 66, we became a police department, and Tom was one of the fellows that came over with us. And so we were at the beginning of the police department in Nankin. There were 30 officers who had experience and 3 rookies. One of the rookies went on to be a deputy chief, and the other ones were a lieutenant and a sergeant. So everybody did pretty good. And then in 1976, my best friend ran for mayor. And I got picked to be the deputy mayor, his administrative assistant, and we were in office in Westland for 6 years under the Taylor administration. And today I'm just hanging around.
You're still active.
Well, I'm still
give me that.
I'm still active, but it's good to be one of the old boys, which I am, one of the old guys. And so you got a couple of guys here that know what the city was like before it became a city and how it got to be a city. There was a lot of stuff that was going on in the township in those days that caused Nankin to want to become a city. One of which was we went into the city of West in Wayne in 1960 after they had taken a good portion of the township into their city. So people were grabbing portions of Nankin Township then. So that's where we're at today.
Well, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned about how actually Westland came about, or in part due to what Livonia was trying to do with the mall property.
Yeah. It was a self-defense mechanism on the behalf of the people of Nankin Township. The city of Wayne had attempted an annex of property that parts of Nankin Township that abutted Wayne, and that's on the south side. And then the city of Livonia attempted an annex that would have taken the Livonia boundary from Joy Road down to Warren Road and made Westland Shopping Center part of Livonia. That would have left Nankin Township with almost no commercial tax base, and Nankin Township was faced with a situation where they had to incorporate to defend themselves from this encroachment from both ends. And so that's basically the motivation of why there was this push to become a city.
It was definitely a matter of survival, and you have to give the township fathers a lot of credit. To their credit, what they did was Wayne had tried to annex twice. They finally got the west half of Wayne and the east half of Wayne. Wayne in 1959 was only 2.5 square miles. So and today it's 6 square miles. So they annexed 4 square miles of Nankin Township, and one of the annexations got them the Ford plant. So that was very fortunate on their part. But when Livonia tried to come over, Wayne had tried twice. In one case, they tried to get part of the city, but they wanted to leave out part of the community, which was the North Wayne subdivision, which everybody refers to as North Wayne. That was built for the folks who worked at the bomber plant and for people who were in the Army and so on. And it's the only one left out of, let's see, there was one in Romulus, some in Wayne, some in Ypsilanti, and some in Inkster, and they're almost all gone now. Westland is what's left of what was once a large government project. And but also I could point out that what happened is that the township fathers heard that Livonia was going to try to take that portion of Westland from Joy Road on over to Warren Road, and what they did was they made a slick move. They gave Garden City that part of where West High School is, which is from Wildwood to, I don't know what the street is there over there, where the college is now. Schoolcraft, right. Where Schoolcraft College is. They gave that to Garden City. Needed another high school, so they gave them that land and changed the boundaries. And when Livonia went down to put in their application for annexation, lo and behold, the boundaries were changed. And then they started right away after that, they got a charter commission going, and the charter commission came up with a charter, and then in 1960, I think May, is that right? May of 1966, they had a vote and we became a city. And they elected their first council. So it was kind of exciting. And we were kind of over in Wayne watching all this stuff, and we knew we knew Charlie McAlargy and a few of the people on the commission. So
Tom Brown,
we knew Tom. Of course, Tom was he worked at J. Austin Oil Company, and J. Austin Oil was in the city of Wayne, so we knew the guys that delivered fuel oil. So actually, he was office manager over there. So so we know quite a few of the people.
So once Westland becomes a city, and in preparation for that, or anticipation for that, they knew that the sheriffs were no longer going to provide police protection for an incorporated city, so they had to start their own police department. And they wouldn't have time to hire people who had never been policemen and send them to the Detroit Academy. So they were looking to establish a police department with the experienced officers. And Westland, when the department was formed, there were officers from all of the suburban communities in this area: Dearborn, Inkster, Wayne, Garden City, and some up from Oakland County. There were, so of the original 33 that Andy mentioned, 30 of them were experienced officers. Andy and I were two of the officers, along with, I think, Bob Barthold, who was also a Nankin Township resident at the time, who knew most of the city streets, which was very important for dispatching cars and that sort of thing. The very first night, the police department, by the way, was headquartered in the basement of City Hall, the existing City Hall. The very first night, we started on midnights on October 15th. We put a crew out on the road, probably 3 or 4 police cars, to cover, and at that time the population of the city of Westland is almost exactly what it is right now. We had 86,000 people, and the area was exactly the same. It hasn't changed. So the amount of territory that had to be policed and the number of residents that had to be protected is the same now as it was back then. Just a quick anecdote of what happens when you bring people in that aren't familiar with the area. And by the way, that when we've dispatched, after roll call, and we're sending these officers out on the road, we gave them maps. Some of the guys looked at them, some of them may not have. But in any event, I was the dispatcher because I knew the streets that first night, and one of my officers called in saying that he was stopping a traffic violator, and he gave me the location, and he got out of the car apparently before I had time to correct him. And after he had done what he was going to do with that traffic violator, he got back in the car and called to let us know that he was back in service. And at that time I told him that seeing he was up on 5 Mile Road, that he should turn left and come south into the city, get back into the city of Westland to finish out his tour. And it was just a kind of a comical incident, but we had things like that occurred. One of the things that Andy and I were both on the Wayne Police Department for 6 years, and we got terrific training because at that time every officer on that department was former military. Everybody, like I say, everybody on there had been in the service. So these are a bunch of, and some of those folks had been in Korea and some other, not good places, but they were all very, very mature and full of common sense. One of the things that the city used to stress was that the police officers, each one of them, should try to get to know as many of the local merchants in the community as they can. And in the station itself, we kept a log of contact people from every business in town. So if something happened to a business at night, we knew right away just to go to the book, pull it up, contact them, get in case say you had a hardware store and a patrol car observed somebody breaking into the store at 4 o'clock in the morning. They would call that in. We don't want the officers to rush in at that point because we don't know who else might be in there. So they would call the proprietor, and the proprietor would show up and could advise them as to if they didn't know the layout or that sort of thing. It was just a real good PR thing, and it was good police work. And a lot of that was done then. Once we got to be 36 square miles, it was more and more difficult to do it just because of the mere size of it. And the fact that an officer who might work in the south end down along Van Born Road is not going to know the proprietors of business at Joy and Inkster. So
there's a lot to be said for being small. When we came over here, I think we're 25.6 square, 22 point something square miles.
Right.
Now but when you're driving, you drive around Garden City, or you drive through Inkster, or you drive down Merriman Road or Middlebelt Road, Middlebelt Road. You drive Middlebelt Road and you hit Annapolis, and the next thing you know, you're in Inkster again. So then you go on up and turn you're going through all these other communities. So today, now that it was always amazing to me that like the fire department today is combined, but it's so much easier that you can get to a lot of places a lot quicker from Westland than you can from Inkster or Garden City. Our trucks can get there a lot faster because the various departments. So I think that was a good thing with it when they did that. So, but it was an interesting time back in the '60s to be a police officer here when there wasn't as much as there is now. When we came to work in the city hall, across the street from City Hall where Kroger's is, there were 3 houses. Carlson Street didn't go through. Marquette didn't go through. Carlson Street only went down as far as just before Hunter Street and stopped. There was nothing there. That was all wilderness. Everything behind the administrative offices for the Wayne Westland School District, that was all empty. So there was a lot of things. Newburgh Road still flooded with water. You have to understand that in this particular area, water table is not so bad now. But back in the '60s, you could put a shovel in the ground, take 2 scoops of shovel out, and water came right up. One of the reasons that there's a river that runs underneath City Hall, as you well know, and City Hall has been sinking since the day they built it. Since the day they built it, it's been sinking. Westland Shopping Center, before they built that, they built a moat and de-watered the whole thing. Today, there's water that runs under. There's a basement in the shopping center, but there's water that runs all the time, runs out of there, runs across Wayne Road, and dumps into the Rouge River, and it'll run in the hottest part of July. You can go over there and see water running. So there's natural springs underneath all of this stuff. But because we've done so much with paving, infrastructure and all that stuff, the water table is not near what it once was. Where the court is now, that used to be a lake. There was to be water there. The police department's built on a floating slab. I mean, there was a lot of things to do. One of the interesting things is when they built Bailey Building, they put in the pool. And the pool was the first time, we're going to have our own swimming pool in the town, in the city. And they put it in one day, didn't put any water in it, let it dry, and the next day they came and it would pop right out of the ground about 5 feet in the air. The water table just pushed it right out, so they had to start all over again. So anyway, but that's interesting. Some interesting things happened.
Sure. Well, and a lot of interesting things happened during your administration. There was a huge growth of the city at that point in time, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you fill us in on some of the things that occurred when you became mayor?
The good things or the bad things?
There were a lot of good things. This thing that Andy talked about with the pool, we had during 1966 there was a recession, and the recession was much like it is right now. People were out of work, there were no jobs, tax base was going down, those kind of things, and the federal government wanted to get things going again, so they came up with a stimulus program. But everybody's heard a lot about stimulus recently. It's not a new phenomena. And one of the things that they said to local governments is that we will provide funding for projects that you can prove to us you'll be able to start within 90 days of getting your approval. And we were fortunate in that we had 2 projects that we had all the engineering work done on them already that we could submit. And we decided to submit a 3rd one. The city of Inkster had just built a recreation center on Inkster Road. And my planning director knew the architect that had designed it. And he contacted him and asked if he would allow us to submit his plans for a site to build a building in Westland. He did, and we submitted the recreation plan, for the plans for the recreation building, the plans for a industrial park at the corner of Cherry Hill and Newburgh, which is called the Campbell Industrial Park, first one in the city of Westland, and another, the engineering plans to take all of the lead pipe water lines out of Norwayne and replace them with safer pipes. We were the only city in Michigan to receive 3 grants. All of the 3 of them, all of them were 100% funded. So that was one of the things where we had that kind of initial success, and it was just part of it was just kind of serendipitous that the economy was bad and all these things came together. But we were in a position to take advantage of it, so that was kind of neat. There was in Westland at that time, there still remained a number of large county drains. And when I say large, I'm talking about things that are 8 to 10 foot deep and maybe 20 foot across. And there are miles and miles and miles of these still remaining in Wayne County, and some of the if you go down into Sumter and those areas, you'll still see these kinds of drains. One of them ran right along what is now Central City Park, and it was just a few feet away from the homes in that area, and kids naturally gravitated toward those drains, and they were nasty. There were all kinds of junk in them, and in some cases even trees growing out of them. And we had gotten complaints from the neighbors saying that they wanted this thing cleaned up, rightfully. And we had contacted the Drain Commission without much success. And finally we decided that we would move the drain over a little bit and enclose the existing drain. And we did that. The Drain Commission was not pleased, and they sent out a backhoe operator along with one of their attorneys to reopen the drain. And I was mayor. I was on the way to work that morning, and when this happened, and I was contacted, and by the time I got there, the ladies from the neighborhood had surrounded the backhoe and had intimidated the backhoe driver to the point that he was more than reluctant to put that backhoe in the ground. And the Drain Commissioner's attorney was furious. And we stood alongside the drain and talked back and forth, and finally it got to the point where their attorney had called the Drain Commission office and found that there was some room for negotiation. Our attorney, Chuck Bocas, came to the site, and we drew up an agreement on the trunk of a car saying that the city of Westland would agree to take over responsibility for our enclosed drain, and that the Drain Commissioner could, as provided by law, still collect money for a drain that they didn't have to clean. So we solved the problem, but it was just kind of a unique way to do it. It's probably not the best way to go about it sometimes, but we had exhausted what we thought were the normal remedies, and they weren't working, so something had to be done.
During those times, in 1976, to the time that Tom left office, there was a lot of things that happened. One of the things is, there's still a certain amount of roads in the city of Westland that are not paved. But, there was the prior administration, the Taylor administration, there had been fighting. They wanted to do all kinds of funny things to the roads. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was kind of like cap and gravel roads and all that stuff. We went ahead and was able to get a majority of the neighborhoods to say that they would take paving. So we paved everything from Newburgh Road to Wayne Road, from, I got to go all the way, Cherry Hill, all the way as far as, I can't think of the name of the street, but as far as the post office, all that we managed to get paved. Then we had a problem with the roads are not as big as the roads today. You have to bring the roads up to city standard and put curbs and gutters and all that stuff in. This was a little different, but they do have nice paved roads. And we decided that there should be no parking on one side of the street. Well, we had a terrible influx of people say, can't do that, you can't do that. But we held the guns, and after about 2 weeks, they decided, it's a lot better being able to drive down the street than having to stop while somebody's coming the other way. So the no parking, that managed to take place. So that's one of the things we did was the parking, paving of those unpaved roads. Then we not only did that, then we went down and I lived over on, what street did I live on? I can't remember. Fernwood Street. And we got the people over there to say, one of which I signed, that to do the paving, and we paved over there. So that means, I think today you got about, I don't know, maybe 50, 60 miles of unpaved roads.
Yeah.
Something like that, 50 or 60 miles. But before there was a lot, and that meant road graders and salt, and it meant the stuff you put down, so the gravel and the chloride and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So we got all that. That was done. We also got to finish when he took office. Greenwood Villa was under construction, and there was a big flap over that, which we managed to take care of and got it open. And there was a lot of controversy, but that was started under Gene McKinney's term, and it was a great thing for the city of Westland. And then we got to build Taylor Towers, which was a different kind of deal. It wasn't owned. It was going to be owned by a nonprofit corporation. He was big into nonprofit corporations. We got that, and the ice arena ran under a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. And a lot of things. The golf course ran under a nonprofit, which was good for the community as far as things go. So we did quite a bit. And we leased that area behind City Hall that they just what do you call it? What is it? What?
Dedicated?
No, not rededicated. We put all the stuff in there. Remediated it. Yeah. Well, we got to release that for 99 years from the Road Commission. So that's pretty good, I thought.
Well, and we're still benefiting now financially from the Taylor Towers. Innovative way that the financing occurred on Taylor Towers, and now that all of that debt was paid off, and we're now able to refinance it and pull out. We were able to completely renovate it and update it, mm-hmm. As well as now pull out some of that capital that we're going to put into a capital improvements fund, so that it can only be used for capital improvements within the city.
That's wonderful.
Okay.
That's really nice.
So you want a little more detail on how that happened?
Absolutely.
This is very interesting. It's a good time.
The company that built or was intending to build Greenwood Villa had submitted a plan to the Planning Commission. The mayor was in favor of it, but it had set at the Planning Commission, and it was still at the Planning Commission when I came into office. One of the reasons that it was being held up was that there was the state of Michigan said that the city could build that they would fund a low-income senior citizen project there on Cowan Road, but it had to include some garden apartments in the back, which would be for low-income families. And low-income families at that time, politically, were perceived as being undesirable. So this whole project that was being held up. When I came into office, I attended the first Planning Commission meeting, and I said, you folks have had this thing for about a year. You're not intended to be a legislative body. Your purpose is to either vote yes or vote no and send it to the city council. But as soon as it got passed, it was in the papers. Westland's going to have this new low-income senior citizen housing. and they did not have a rental office established on the site, and so people were calling City Hall, and they got directed to the mayor's office, and we were just getting bombarded with calls. And it was obvious very shortly that even if they built that thing and were able to open it up that day, there wouldn't be enough to handle half of the demand, or a quarter of the demand. So we began to look at alternatives, and we found a housing commission in Houston, Texas, that had done a special kind of bonding, bond financing, to create enough money to build a senior citizen facility that wouldn't have any that wouldn't cause the city any liability. So we investigated that. Myself and the president of the council at the time, Justine Barnes, and the city attorneys went to Houston and looked at this thing and said, this is a really good thing, and we think it'll work for Westland. So we came back. We actually sent the proposal to the bond attorneys in Detroit, and they said, no, you can't do this. And we couldn't find a legal firm to handle it for us. So our city attorneys, Chuck Bokus and Angela Plakas, knew of some very innovative bond counsels in Columbus, Ohio. And we got those people to come up, and they underwrote the bonds. We sold private bonds with the understanding that the facility would be owned and operated by a nonprofit corporation created by the city for that specific purpose. And at such time as the bonds were paid off, 30 years later, the total asset would revert to the ownership of the city, which it has done, as you just described. And the city is doing all the right things about maintaining the asset by putting all that money into improving it. So it's going to be a slam dunk, I would think, to get it refinanced in very favorable terms. So that's how it came about that Taylor Towers was built. Some of the things that happened as a spinoff was that the road that runs north and south past the fire station down to Marquette didn't go through at that time. It stopped, as Andy had said, just a short ways down. And we put that road through to Marquette. And Marquette at that time stopped at the edge of John Glenn High School. There was no Voc Ed Center or the administrative buildings. Those were in Wayne, or the administrative center was in Wayne. So we opened Marquette up to give access to our site for the new building that we were going to build, and just to make it easier to get back and forth.
So and as an aside from that, Tim Dyer was the superintendent of schools, and Dennis O'Neill was his deputy superintendent. He was big on grants. Tim Dyer was in Washington as much as he was here, and he was a personal friend of Bill Ford's, who was our United States representative.
Yeah, he was the chairman of the education.
Yeah, and he was chairman of the education. And if you'll notice that one of the buildings over there is named for Bill Ford. Mm-hmm. And what happened is he got a grant to build those administration buildings. So that was another plus during Taylor's administration. And behind that was woods, what we used to commonly refer to as Cherry Hill Lanes. And in DePonio, was that who it was?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Angelo DePonio owned that property. It was nothing but sand hills where guys used to go back and park and all that kind of stuff. And he gave it to his daughter, who made it into what it is today. After a couple of years, she finally started building houses, and they've got those houses that are in there today. So as things were going along, it was going good. So now we got industrial park, a new building, new residential buildings, and then of course everything started going, and they started the houses that people don't remember that were on Wayne Road, between between Ford Road and Warren Road. They were soon gone, and businesses were coming in, and so there you go. And then they built a new post office in the middle of over there. So we finally got, I can't remember what year we got our post office, but it was a big deal when we got it, finally. Because up until that time, we were getting everything from Wayne. And now, today, Wayne Post Office is on its last legs. They're going to sell the building, and it's all going to become part of the Wayne Westland thing, or the Westland Fire
Right.
Post Office. So things have been happening, are still happening.
When the building that's now known as Taylor Towers was built, actually when it was a proposal, the name on it was Central City Park Towers. And it remained Central City Park Towers for a number of years. After I had left the mayor's office, I went to work for Nationwide Life for a few years. And somewhere during that time that I was with Nationwide Life, the board of directors of Central City Park Towers honored me by changing the name to Taylor Towers. So I just want the folks of Westland to know that that wasn't an ego thing on my. I was certainly flattered and appreciative that my name appeared on a building, but I didn't put it there. The good folks that were on that board, who were all volunteers, and most of them, there are still some that are, I think, Vera Lev. Vera Lev's still on that board. She's been on it for 30 years.
Fred Krause is still on the board.
Yeah.
You know, the thing is that Central City Towers, or Central Towers, was managed by a for-profit corporation. So they took money for their work out of there. And what happened is that the board of directors decided that, you know what, that was too much money was going out and not enough staying in. So they decided that they would make a nonprofit corporation, and the nonprofit corporation would become the managers of the building. So all the money now then, so you got a group, you got a board of directors, and then you've got a management company that consists of people that are nonprofit also. So it worked out to everybody's advantage.
Well, and we had to basically redo that same structure.
Right, you do.
When we
yeah.
went through to do the
Yeah.
refinancing of the
Exactly.
facility
Of the
now.
facility,
so-
right. And we're on the way. We're pretty close to getting. I think they're pretty close to getting the money now.
Yeah, we are very close, and actually, we just went through an appraisal, and because of the improvements that we did, it actually appraised for I want to say about $1 million more than what we had originally anticipated. So the appraisal came back very favorable, and yeah, we're very close to closing on the refinancing.
Yeah, there are 3 senior citizen towers in Westland, and of the 3, I can honestly say that Taylor Towers is by far, including the one in Wayne, is by far the best facility around. It always has been. It's the people they've got people in there now that have been there for almost for the whole length of the thing.
I think there's one 79er left. The building opened 1979, and I think there's one gentleman who's still there. But
You're correct, because I met him. We were over there the middle of this year for one of the residents celebrated her 100th birthday.
Oh yeah, we got a couple of those.
And
Mr. Hall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he actually introduced himself. He was said that he was one of the original residents of the facility.
Being an original is pretty good. Being an original of the 33, that's kind of a neat kind of thing. You say, some of these young kids today on the police department, you say, well, I'm an original, and they have no idea what you mean. They think you're a braised hamburger, I think. But
as Andy said, the buildings is managed by a nonprofit corporation. One owns it, and another one manages it. And there's the same people sit on both boards. It's what's known as an identity of interest corporation. They both have the same goals as far as providing services, whatever it might be. In this case, it's housing. My involvement with Taylor Towers continued. I left the city and was with Nationwide Life for 4 years. And during that time, I used to check in every once in a while with the people that were on the board of the building to find out how it was going. And during one of those talks, the president of the board at that time told me that their relationship with the management company had deteriorated to the point that they wanted to do something different, but they didn't know exactly what they wanted to do. And I said, have you ever considered self-management? And they said, no, we don't know how we'd go about that. And I said, well, I'll write up a proposal for you. And I did and submitted it to them. And they said, this sounds good. Would you be the manager? Would you consider being the manager? And I said, I've managed things. I managed the police department and a city, but I've never managed a housing project. And I said, let me check into it. And I checked with HUD, and they said, well, you'll have to get certified. You have to get certain certifications. And at that time, there was a lady named Nora Harden, who currently lives in Taylor Towers, who was running the manager at Willow Creek on Newburgh Road. And we knew the owners of Willow Creek, and they agreed that they would provide support services to me if I was appointed as the manager until such time as I got my certification. HUD agreed to that, and that's how Taylor Towers ended up with a director named Thomas Taylor. And I had innumerable people. I was there 15 years as I was managing, and a lot of people, I had to correct them when they said, oh, this is a very nice building that you own. I said, no, people of Westland own the building, and thank you very much.
But it's been an interesting ride in the fact that a lot of things took place in the city, how it's progressed, how it's grown. The people who have been in the management of the city, the councils, and it's nice to look back and see, you know, we had some bad times, but we had some really good times, and it's always been I don't know what the word is I want to use. There's a word, you know, it's been very, very, as they say, interesting.
Yeah, fulfilling. You get a lot of positive feedback as well. One of the things that I think you learn very quickly, and if you don't learn it, you're going to suffer for it, is that having a good idea is in and of itself not enough. And you mentioned one that is still a very tender spot for me, and that is that at some point cable television started to move into this area, and it was there was a lot of activity going on. There was a lot of competition between cable companies to obtain franchises with local communities. And when we saw how much activity there was, and it was intense, I had the idea that I should look into the possibility of not necessarily giving away something that was very valuable, but rather seeing if we couldn't hold on to part of it at least for the benefit of the city. Hopefully they'd be able to, if we did that, if we actually owned the system and contracted with the cable company to run it for us, instead of issuing a license to a cable company to come in and own it themselves, if we couldn't get either lower rates or a little off the top for the city. And so I began to investigate it, and I found out that at that time there were something like 15 municipalities around the U.S. That had municipally owned cable companies. One of the really successful one is Wyandotte. Mm-hmm. The city of Wyandotte not only owns they own the electric company, they own their own water and sewer treatment plant, and they own their own cable company. I studied that for a little over a year, and I got very, very excited about it, because the more I found out about it, the more I realized that this thing was going to get bigger and bigger. And I'd had conversations with the school district, who had a very innovative media guy who was wanting to put on cable programs for the district. We had conversations with the utility companies that said that if the city owns the cable company, we'd like to talk to you about reading your water and gas meters over the cable company, so we don't have to send people out on the street to do that sort of thing. And we found places that were doing that. Then I made a colossal error in that I began to promote this as my plan. And the old biblical admission that you can't be a prophet in your own land became a reality. There's always politics going on, and if you have an active group or even an individual who's not your political ally, who's your adversary, they could seize on these kind of an issues and say, I know this guy, I've known him for years, and he's not that smart. He doesn't know anything about this, and he's wanting us to do this innovative thing, and there's not that many places where it's been done. In retrospect, what I should have done was to go out and find the national authority, the national consultant, who had experience doing these kinds of things, and have that person front the proposal. And we didn't do that. I didn't do that. And it ended up going to referendum. And the result was that it failed 12-1. Now I ran for political office 4 times, never lost an election. And the 5th election that we put on was to change the city charter to extend the mayor's term from 2 years to 4 years, and I passed that. So this was a real eye-opener, that just having a good idea and studying it and is not enough. You need to be aware of the arena that you're working in.
Well, and I remember actually that was going on right when my wife and I moved into the city. I want to say back in 78, 79, somewhere right around in that time frame.
Right.
And what you were proposing, or what the system was, is not dissimilar to what the cable companies now are proposing, where not only you could read their meters, but have home security, fire system tied into it. Everything that Comcast and WOW are now offering as part of their cable packages is exactly what you were proposing to do back in the late 70s.
Yeah.
There was a city in Texas that he went to that has that.
The woodlands.
Yeah, that every house was protected by. If a fire started, it immediately went to the fire department.
I went down there and saw their response system, and they took me out to talk to some homeowners. In the South, air conditioning units are in the attics, and I talked to a family who said they were in the backyard barbecuing when the fire department arrived in front of their house, went into their house, went into the attic, and stopped what was going to be a fire. It had heated up to the point that it sent an alarm in before the family even knew about it. Now, if this same thing happened at 3 o'clock in the morning and they weren't wired in, the family would become aware of it when their ceiling of their house was falling on them in flames.
And all of these houses had cedar shake on it.
Yeah, they would have gone right up.
Yeah.
But that was one of the very first ones. And and the truck that the fire department came in was not a big pumper, because they didn't need those down there. They got to the fires so fast that they could use a much smaller equipment and go in with fire extinguishers or whatever.
And of course, today our fire department, all the new places are sprinkled. His house is sprinkled, and so consequently, today our fire department saves lives, which is what they do. I can attest to that. But everything in its time. But one of the reasons that this thing today, if we own that, I don't know how much time we got, but if we own that cable company, it'd be about $2.5–3 million coming into the city coffers, which we don't have today. But one of the, when it became a political football, and we got overturned, well, that's when things went awry. Is that a good word?
Well, we mentioned a few things that occurred, but what are some of the other things when you were mayor that were highlights or lowlights of your administration?
We did have our protagonist on the council, and some of the things that happened.
Or not a protagonist, an antagonist. An antagonist. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's correct. Thank you very much. But I get them mixed up. But council meetings were a trip. We might go 12, 1 o'clock at night in a heated council meeting. And we're just, as the administration, we were just sitting there. I do have a funny story I'd tell you.
Sure.
Right. Well, at one meeting, Glenn Shaw was our assessor, and he sat the mayor, myself, the assessor, like they do today, and we were sitting there, and a certain council lady, who no longer lives around the area, she says, she always did this, through the chair to whoever she's going to talk to. Through the chair to Mr. Shaw. Go ahead, madam. And she started. And she had at least a 3-part question that went on for about 6.5, 7 minutes. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm wondering what Shaw's going to do. I had no idea. And she got all done, and she looked around, and she said, well, and he said, the answer to your question, number 1, yes, number 2, no, number 3, yes. And she had no idea what the question was that she had asked. And I excused myself very quickly and left, because I was going to spit all over my laughing. I was laughing so hard. I went in the back room. But that was one of the best answers I have ever heard a person in the administration give to somebody. So,
well, and our existing city hall, you had mentioned that the police department was originally in the basement. You were telling me earlier the court was also located in the building?
City Hall.
The court was in the council chambers at City Hall. Following that, they rented space on Warren Road, Warren near Farmington. And then when I came into office, we were looking at one of the budget sessions, we were looking at the costs of different things, and the rental costs on the building, the court building, was just, I thought, exorbitant. And we had all this property. And so we were always talking to developers, and I asked the folks from Greenwood Villa, not Greenwood Villa, from Willow Creek. They built builders. We knew them because they built senior citizen buildings. They owned the one in Garden City, they owned the one in Wayne and Romulus, other buildings, and Willow Creek. And I said to them, we're thinking about the idea of building a court building and owning it, but we don't have any money. And they said, well, do you own the land? I said, yes, we do. We own this piece of property, and we showed them the property. And they said, well, let us talk about this. And they came back to us with plans and said, we'll do this. You sell us the land for $1. We will build a court on it and lease it back to you for a certain period of time, at which time you'll own it for another $1. and your lease payments will be less than your current rent. And we said, well, how can that be, that you're going to give us a building in effect for what we're paying now for less than what we're paying in rent? And they said, well, we can do it for that. And they did. They came in and built that building. And actually they were building it. Do you remember the green wind that came out of the west and knocked down most of the trees in Westland? The court building was under construction at the time, and the walls were blown down and had to be put up again. And as Andy's right, that because of the high water table, the building is actually a boat, and the boat is made out of concrete, and the building floats in it. And that's the same thing that the Bailey building is, another building that is a boat. And what had happened with the pool in the back was that everybody understood every contractor understood the deal about the water table in Westland. You had to de-water every site. You had to put well points down and keep motors running on them 24 hours a day, for some cases months, to get the water table low enough so that you could pour cement, so that it didn't turn to soup. And we got into a disagreement with the swimming pool contractor. And apparently he wasn't paying his subs, his contract subs. And on a Friday night, he left the site, his subs turned off, he said, this thing went to court. The pumps were all turned off, and the plastic pool was in the hole at that time. And when we got there Monday morning,
It was up.
like Andy said, it looked like the Titanic coming up out of the water. And we were in court with the pool contractor and others for a couple of years. Angelo handled the arbitration for us, which thankfully ended up, like most of the things that he handled, and ended up well.
Unfortunately, we're about out of time here today, and I know that we're going to have you back and do another segment on historically speaking sometime in the near future. So I'd like to thank both of you for being here today, and I know that we're only scratching the surface on some of the knowledge and memories that you have about what's gone on in this city. So again, thank you very much, and thank everyone in the audience for watching us today on Historically Speaking.